Do you suffer from poor podcasts? Wish you could find a podcast that wasn't boring, but didn't bombard you with vulgarity or get into the latest politics? Want a podcast that's actually from lifelong gamers and not just personalities? Introducing the Multiplayer Gaming Podcast. Side effects may include actually enjoying your podcast, learning about awesome games you may have missed, gaming news, fun game reviews, and laughter. If you experience lightheadedness, dizziness, or nausea, please continue to listen anyway, as we assure you it'll be worth it. Oh, and check out multiplayersquad.com to get bonus episodes, early access, ad-free episodes, exclusive Discord perks, giveaways, basically everything cool. Check it out to get everything cool. Now on to the show.
Hello, welcome to the Multiplayer Gaming Podcast. We are a group of three dads who love gaming, and you can join us for episodes every Monday, Thursday, and Saturday, where we break down something related to video games. Please follow us on socials at MultiplayerPod, and if you like what we do and want to help support the show and get extra content like the Squadcast, which releases twice a month, head over to multiplayersquad.com, where you can become a Patreon supporter and unlock that additional content. Today is a bonus round episode, and we are going to be doing a full console breakdown of the Sony PlayStation 2. I am your host, Paul, and I am joined, as always, by two of the best people I know. Coming up first, his beard might be inspired by the 2018 God of War, but today we're going back to the 2000s before Kratos' full beard grew in. It's Josh.
I am no baby face. Boy.
How long have you had a beard, Josh? How many years?
Let's see. I started getting old and losing my hair, and then I would have looked like an eraser. So probably like around 30, I think, is when my wife was like, you know, you need something like hair-wise going on your head. You should try growing a beard. And then I went, okay.
So it's like a zero-sum game. Whatever you lost on top, you had to gain under the chin.
There may be pictures out there where I had like the chin strap beard. The real thin, like pencil line beard and mustache for a little while, because I thought it made me look cool and skinny.
Nice. And then joining us, this is kind of funny because even though he's been a very close friend of mine for many years, I actually have no idea what he might have played on PS2. I'm just taking a stab in the dark here. Maybe he was seen as the Prince of Persia in possession of the Sands of Time and the Dagger of Time. It's Michael.
You know, it's funny. I'm not even sure if I know what I played on the PS2 now because it's been so long. All I know is that I have to make a comment that with Josh's hair, basically one could say that it's migrated south for the winter as he approaches the winter years of his life.
That's fair. And what about you, Michael? How long have you had your beard?
Since I shaved it 10 years ago when I had a goatee, and my wife said, I don't like change, put it back. And I said, okay, I'm just going to grow the sides too. And it worked out okay because I've had it since then. And it's not a good beard, but it exists. So,
Well, I'm here holding down the fort for the non-bearded folk. But today we're going to be breaking down the PS2. What a fun console. I love doing these kinds of breakdowns. We've done it twice before. We did a breakdown of the original NES back in February of 21. We did the Xbox 360 back in November of 21. And today we're going to deep dive the PS2. So let's just jump right into things. All right. And let's set aside individual game titles for now. We're going to have plenty of time to talk about all the great games that were on the PS2. But when you think back on the overall legacy of the PS2 console, what are some of the first things that jump out?
I remember that it killed my favorite console of all time at the time, which was the Sega Dreamcast, which I still probably have more hours played on than the PS2. But let's see, what was this like? It was the year 2001 or 2000?
2000's when the PS2 released.
Yeah. So Britney Spears and NSYNC, and then Gran Turismo 3. What more do you need, right?
Oh man, he went Britney Spears and NSYNC. This show's not 5 minutes in, and we're getting crazy already.
Well, funny enough, I actually did look up to see what was on the Billboard Top 100 when the PS2 released. Oh, I got a couple for you guys. The number 3 song at the time was With Arms Wide Open by Creed.
I was going to say
it was not a good time.
It had to be a Creed or Nickelback song.
Please don't ever mention Creed again on this show, ever. Like, I'll quit.
Oh, not a good time for music. I actually was a big fan of Nelly. Country Grammar by Nelly was number 12.
Wow.
And Who Let the Dogs Out by the Baha Men was number 44.
Okay, that's classic right there.
Did we ever figure that one out, though, by the way? Who did let the dogs out?
Who?
I don't think we ever did.
No, who let the dogs out?
Who?
It's like the who's on first thing. You know what I mean?
Ah.
It's who, and then people keep saying like, who let the dogs out? And they're like, who?
Who?
Yeah.
There you go. I think you solved it, Josh. Yeah, I think the first thing I think of with the PS2 is most people would probably say it's the greatest console ever. I think if you went out and did a survey, I think you would get more responses for the PS2 than anything else. I think it was just great hardware, great games, great marketing, kind of just all the stars aligned. And this was, an incredibly well-selling console that I think most people really loved.
The PS2, it's weird because when you think about like what's the best console, I think people don't look back that far because, I mean, let's be honest, we're 22 years past the PS2. So there are a lot of people alive and listening to the show right now that have never seen one, have never laid hands on one. They know the PlayStation legacy, but they're just sitting there going like, it's the PS2. Like, why? Like, what made that so great? Why is it indeed the number 1 selling console of all time? And so like, what gives? And that's what we're going to break down today.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a perfect transition because I do have a couple statistics I thought I would share with you guys. A couple of these are going to have some guesses from you guys to see how close you can get. But
You're
the
going
PS2,
down, Michael. Do we get to score it? Can we score it?
I think it's like 2 questions.
Everything is
sure,
a competition.
we can score.
But if I win the competition, can I maybe just borrow some of Josh's beard and use some spirit gum and make it my own beard, and that's my prize? And Josh can borrow the hair on top of my head.
Ooh, you do have some nice hair.
I have some. It's very luscious up here. Yeah.
I will buy the winner a PS2. How about that?
I'll take it. I will take that.
All right. So the PS2 is part of the 6th generation of consoles, which might be my overall favorite. That means that it's lumped in the same generation as the Nintendo GameCube, the Microsoft Xbox, and the Sega Dreamcast. Now, the Dreamcast was the least selling of the bunch. It sold 9 million units. Third place is the GameCube with 22 million units sold. Second place was the Xbox with 24 million sold. How many units do you think the PS2 sold, which outperformed all 3?
Hold on. What was the second place one?
Are we doing all time?
Yes, all time. The Xbox sold 24 million for second place. How many units do you think the PS2 sold?
74.8 million.
Okay.
I'm going to say it blew it away.
I'm gonna shoot for. I think it's like 100 million units, dude. It was insane. It's some crazy number like that.
You're both more than 50 million short of the actual number. 155 million units sold. That means, I think most of us probably remember a lot of people owning Xboxes. There were 6.5 PS2s sold for every 1 Xbox that was sold in stores.
Yeah, that's a huge difference amongst those.
Yeah. Totally wild. Now, there's a couple reasons that I think why the PS2 sold so well. So just a couple quick things about the hardware. First of all, it was fully backwards compatible with the PS1. Now, you guys know that was not something that really existed back then. You could not put your NES games into a Super Nintendo, right? So being able to use all of your old games was a huge bonus. This doesn't mean much to me, but apparently the I/O processor had a PS1 core in it, and it used the exact same type of RAM as the PS1. So every single game fully backward compatible. And what's even more amazing is, I don't know if you guys know this, but DVD players started hitting the market in 99, 2000, and DVD players often cost $300 or more. And guys, what do you think the Xbox 2 could also do?
Yeah, play DVDs, but
play DVDs.
This is, to me, the fact that the PS2 was an affordable DVD player on top of a gaming console is the number one reason that I think it did what it did. Because at that time, I don't know if you guys remember VHS tapes, man. I remember Betamax and VHS and all that. But when
Betamax
DVDs came out, it was superior. It's true. But when DVDs came out, like, everybody wanted a DVD player. You didn't have to rewind them. The picture was phenomenally better. The sound was better. I mean, this was cutting edge technology at the time. But it's like you said, Paul, they were $300, and this is $300 back in the early 2000s, which is probably like $800 today.
Yeah, somewhere around there.
Right? Yeah.
Right. And so if you could, it was a no-brainer. If your family wanted a DVD player, it was like, hey, we can buy a DVD player, or we can just buy a PlayStation 2, which plays DVDs for us. Oh yeah, and by the way, we can game on it, so now my kid is happy at the same time. Like I said, for me, I think it's the number one reason that it was so, like, just worldwide in its popularity.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that too, because I actually worked at an electronics store when the PS2 came out and when the Dreamcast came out, like right at the very end of high school. I worked at Fry's Electronics. It's long gone back in the day, out of Houston, went to Phoenix, and I sold a bunch of stuff there. Dreamcast came out, and we couldn't keep them on the shelves, probably because they had a demand and supply issue. But PS2 came out, and the whole thing was, I'm like, no, like, people come in like, which one do I want? I'm like, well, Dreamcast is definitely better, but this one has a DVD player, so you should buy that, because then I don't have to walk you over to the AV department and get one of those guys to steal my sale, because we were all like very siloed at the time. And I'm like, well, they're going to rewrite the receipt, the whole thing, and take my sale. And I'm like, hey, you guys looking for a DVD player too? Get the PS2. You're good to go. Gaming and DVD. And that was it.
Now, this is when we were still living in the age of memory cards, which is hard to believe, because even though the PS2 is 21 years old, it's hard to believe that you still had to buy a separate memory card that you would pop into the console to save your games. How much storage do you guys think was on your standard PS2 memory card?
16 megabytes.
I can't go back that far in time because I don't speak megabytes anymore.
16 megabytes.
I just remember at the time, the Dreamcast controller, I think itself had like a memory card slot in it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was like, because memory was a big deal back then.
Yeah. 8 megabytes.
Oh, no. I was
That's
close.
all you got.
I was close.
Oh, I feel like game saves nowadays are like way bigger than that just for singular games. Pretty funny to think about. The PS2, first console that you could orient either horizontally or vertically with the stand. Kind of neat.
I don't know what thing for you guys, because like even to this day, like people are like, "Ooh, I can stand it up or I can lay it down." I might be weird in that take, but I could care less. And honestly, I don't think I would ever want to actually stand it up versus just laying it down on like a TV stand or something. Like TV stands have cubbies for a reason. You know, and it's like you've got your satellite box, you've got your AV receiver, like all these things go long ways, not up and down. And so it seems weird to me that being able to stand something up and down is like a selling point for people.
Well, I think back in the day, it was like there was that myth that like, oh, the disc spins easier if it's up and down or whatever it is. But it's a big deal to me now because I think, Paul, you've got a PS5 and it only stands up, right?
No, it can go either way.
Okay, well, never mind. That's a moot point then, because I've only seen it standing
Paul
up. I'm like, I want to lay it down.
No, I actually don't. This is actually very funny because I was a little salty about this. I bought a new TV and I put up my wall stand, and then I bought a little, you know, whatever they call them, the little console tables that go underneath the TV. Well, then I ended up buying a PS5, and if I try to stand the PS5 up, it's like 1 inch too big where it runs into the TV, and I don't want it to cover the screen. So I've got to keep it horizontal.
I used to have a roommate that used to have these house plants in front of his TV, and one of the branches went in front of the screen. He used to get so mad at me when I was like, can we move the plant like just 2 inches to the right?
That's crazy.
And he's like, but it looks great here. I'm like, it doesn't look great. I can't see the whole TV.
Major conflict between my wife and I is she wants to decorate the TV stand, And so she wants all these plants and everything. Well, we have a really nice sound bar, right, that goes in front of that. And the sound bar has speakers all along the front of it and out the sides and everything. Right. But she wants to put plants on the TV stand in front of the sound bar. And then the leaves from the plants stick up within an inch. It's not much, but like an inch on the bottom of the TV. And I'm like, baby, you can't do that. And she's like, why? It looks so nice. And I'm like, no. And she's like, you just want a plain TV stand with a TV and a soundbar on it. And I'm like, yeah,
that's exactly what I want. Yes, that's exactly what I'm going for. And forever it will be that way.
Oh, too funny. All right, so let's go back in time to when the PS2 released. So we're talking October of 2000. Where were you guys at in life and what was going on at the time?
Oh, this was my college days, boy.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So I was, 2000. I was probably a sophomore in college. So, living the life, man. No curfews.
Just remember that this show here is a family-friendly show.
Like I said, just no curfews, going over to my buddy's house. The number one memory that sticks out to me on this one is going over to my friend. We just called him Rowden. So he had his own house. Like a lot of us were in college, but we were still staying with our parents or something like that. But Rowden had his own place, which was great. And so, I mean, probably 3-4 nights a week, we'd go over to Rowden's house and we would play Tekken. If I remember right, I think it was Tekken 5. And I was never a huge fan of Tekken. Like, I loved Street Fighter. I loved Mortal Kombat, Soul Calibur, which is a PS2 game I thought was amazing. Really wasn't a huge fan of Tekken. But when you've got 6 of your buddies over at a friend's place where he's got his own house, and we're barbecuing, we're playing Tekken 5, it was amazing, man. Like, that is the number one memory that stands out to me about the PS2, was just always chilling over at his house. Round robin with the controller, winner stays, loser has to, hand the controller off to somebody else, was amazing.
I believe Soul Calibur was a Sega Dreamcast game, and Soul Calibur 2 was a PS2 game.
Yeah.
Am I right there?
Right.
Can someone vet that?
No, you are. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. No, but you're totally right, because Soul Calibur 2 was like a big deal. I remember that at this time in my life, I had just graduated from high school in June, or late May, early June of 2000, and I had my first apartment. I got my apartment on August 8th of 2000, and it was kind of the same thing. It was literally, we had a 3-bedroom apartment, right? And 5 of us lived there. We had all just gotten out of high school. Nice. We were like, we're getting a place. And we were like, hey, our buddy Brad can't pay rent. No problem. He can sleep on the couch, but he had a PS2.
Oh,
and we're like, you can stay on the couch rent free. I had the master bedroom, my buddy Dan, and we had our buddy Reese, who was the apartment holder. He's the one that actually was under his name, because we didn't have any credit, but Reese was 19. He was a big deal. We were all 18. And we had a bunk bed, a queen-size bunk bed built by Reese's dad in my master bedroom, and we'd often throw the PS2 in there and just play games on the bunk bed so no one could see what people are doing with their controllers and so forth. But yeah, it was a great time, and that's at the exact same time. I literally, the electronics store that I worked at was literally I don't know, probably 30 meters away from my apartment. We got this apartment because we all worked at the same electronics store, and that was just life.
Yeah,
we'd all walk to work. We'd go to work, we'd come home, EverQuest and PS2 all day long, and that was it.
Very nice. For me, since I'm just a little bit younger than you guys, I had just started my junior year in high school, so I was 16 at the time. I had my very first job, which was at Harkins Movie Theater, and growing up, my parents never wanted me to own a video game system, and I was not a gamer growing up. The first system I ever had was a 64, which I bought with my own money when I was 15. So I had only really been gaming for about a year, but I would not even consider myself a gamer. I spent almost all my time just playing basketball and talking about the Phoenix Suns. That was, basketball was life back then. This is also at the time I had just broken up with my very first girlfriend, whose name was actually Jenny McCarthy, which is very funny.
Wow.
No relation.
No, we know the truth, Paul.
Are you sure?
No relation to the famous Jenny McCarthy. And I was 4 months away from when I would start dating Nikki, who would eventually be my wife and mother to my 5 kids. So very, very important time in my teenage years. And the PS2, I spent an incredible amount of time playing at my girlfriend Nikki's house at the time. Her older brother Timmy had a PS2, and for about a straight year, we would just order Peter Piper pizza every single day for lunch, which a lot of you out there wouldn't know because I think they're exclusive to Arizona.
Yeah,
I think so.
It's not very good pizza, but it's very
terrible.
cheap.
But people around here love it. I hear
And
people rave about Peter Piper pizza. I'm like, that pizza sucks, people.
Yeah, like if I'm gonna get pizza delivered, I would never consider having it delivered from there ever. It's like cardboard with cheese.
Well, they had a good to go deal where you could walk out with 2 large pizzas and 2 2-liters, and it was like $11.99 or something. So we would get that every day, and me, Nikki, and her cousins, Ryan and Anthony, the 4 of us just played games all day, every day, playing PS2 for the most part, but a little bit of GameCube as well, because that's what I owned. So I would bring my GameCube over there, and we would play it there. All right, so then one last fact before we start talking in a little bit more detail here. The PS2, released in 2000, they continued manufacturing it all the way until 2013.
No.
Which is when they started making the PS4. So guys, the whole time that they're making the PS3, they're still manufacturing and selling PS2s. FIFA 14, as in 2014, FIFA 14 released on the PS2. That's how long people continued to play the PS2.
The crazy thing about that too was that one of the reasons that they were able to do that was at the end of its sales life. I won't say the life of the console, but at the end of when they were still selling these things, you could pick up a PS2 for under $100.
Yeah.
You know, and so it made it insanely accessible for, I can't think of a console that was that cheap. Can you guys?
No.
Oh,
that anybody
100?
wanted to play for $100, you know, and then had an amazing library of games. Like they just, when Sony did the PS2, they got so many things right. Like everything fell into place. Hey, we included a DVD player, cutting edge technology, and we didn't charge you an arm and a leg for it. It came out a full year before the Xbox and the GameCube did. And
Huge
even though,
jumpstart.
right. I mean, you get that generation of gaming. Like now, if you look at it, right, like there's this mega race with Xbox and PlayStation. We see it with the PS5 and the Xbox Series, right?
Yeah.
Like where it's like, you know, hey, which one's going to release first? We got to hurry it up and get them out there. Even if we don't have games you want to play, we got to get our console out there because that's because of the PS2. Because when the PS2 came out, there was no competition at the time. And what's funny is, comparatively speaking to the GameCube and the Xbox, the PS2's hardware sucked, man. Like, people bought it because it was the first thing out. They didn't buy it because it was the latest and greatest. And, you know, now everything's the big competition about who's got the best hardware, who's got the best graphics. Oh, you know, this has got ray tracing and variable refresh rates and blah, 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 blah. But back then it was just, hey, we're out and we have games, buy us. And they nailed that, you know? And so that, with the backwards compatibility with the PS1 so that you could keep playing all of your old game library and then look forward to the new games that were going to be exclusive to the PS2, it was a home run all the way around.
Ironically enough, in 2013, when the PS2 was $100, it's just like a Britney Spears concert ticket. I still couldn't afford it at the time. But was that the PS2 Slim at the time? Did they get rid of that, the big bulky one? Because it still wasn't bulky. Like if you think about when Josh brings up the Xbox and the
that thing
GameCube,
was a brick, dude.
and the GameCube was hideous. It looked like a Fisher
GameCube
Price
was
Lego
portable,
toy.
at least. The Xbox.
I didn't think the GameCube looked hideous.
I thought
liked
it was
the
awful.
purple and
No,
the
it
little
was ugly.
carry
It was
handle.
awful.
GameCube was
terrible.
ugly. It was a great
It was
console.
so small.
Yeah,
It was
I
so
know, but
little.
it was ugly.
It was tall. It was tall though. It was a cube.
It
That's
did look
exactly
like
what
it was
a
made
cube.
out of Legos.
It was a cube.
Yeah. It was a kid's toy. But the PS2 did essentially. I mean, one could say that it did kill the Dreamcast. Although I think Dreamcast killed Dreamcast because they didn't have a lot of games, a lot of titles. They were infamously like not open source at all, which is one thing that I think PlayStation did well. Is they had a lot of different contracts out there, or not contracts, but they had a lot of different developers creating games that were not necessarily exclusive and so forth. And it made a big deal, that plus, you know, the DVD player and the slim, beautiful, beautiful little fit. And it wasn't big and bulky like the Xbox or a Fisher Price toy like the GameCube. So,
Yeah. And I think just the fact that it was backwards compatible was just such a big deal because at release, you always have like 7 to 10 games and most of them are trash. You've got like a couple decent ones. Everyone tends to buy that 1 or 2 games. So for something like the Dreamcast, you didn't have a whole lot to play. And I think a lot of people would have even maybe decided to trade it in and go get a PS2 or something like that because they had all these old games. You could even still buy used PS1 games that were super cheap and play them in the PS2. So you could have that immediate instant library, which was just so neat. And
wasn't the PS2 actually more backwards compatible than the PS3?
Oh, yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Because the PS3, it was like only certain titles will move over. Like, that's still a big deal. And that's something I think that needs to be talked about. That's still a big deal today. Like, when the PS5 came out, one of the first questions I raised my hand and said was, can I play PS4 games on the PS5 if I get one? You know? And of course, now it's a yes. But it's funny because that was actually a little bit of anxiety for me because I own like 100 discs of the hard discs because I don't buy them digitally. I'm like Paul, I'm old school, you know. I want to go to Blockbuster and rent the console and rent the discs and so forth, you know. But the whole thing is like, is this backwards compatible? And the PS2 like was a pioneer at the time, even so that when PS3 came out, Sony kind of pulled back and said, hold on a minute, we got to make more money off of our new console and try to get this going this way, you know, and so forth. But that was a big deal.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I could be wrong on this, but I think you could also, for many games, you could plug the PS1 controller into a PS2 and you could play most games with it. Now, the PS1 controllers did not have the dual analog sticks.
Right.
But as long as the game didn't require those, you could actually plug that into the PS2 as well.
You're 100% right, because we actually I used one of each one time. We were playing a game, the controller broke in that apartment, Brad's PS2, and we used one of it, like, will this work? And it actually worked, but only on certain games, and you probably hit the nail on the head. It was only certain games that didn't need the actual analog sticks.
That's when you tell Brad, hey, Brad, if you're going to live here, you need to go buy another controller.
Well, later on, when Brad's PS2 licensing ran out, when we thought, you know, PS2 is not good enough, he actually started power leveling us in EverQuest for free, Josh.
Oh, okay.
And that was it.
No
we
more,
were like,
man. Say no more, Brad. You know you get to move into the guest room at this point.
Yep. And that was it. Like, literally, Brad would actually, at one point towards the end of EverQuest, like 2002, when it started to kind of have a downfall, he actually got paid real life money to power level alts of Afterlife, which was...
people made so much money on that
game.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
How funny. Your own personal power leveler / gold farmer.
Yep.
All right. Now, did you guys own a PS2? Because I did not.
I did not own one, but I had multiple friends that had one. Like I said, my friend Rowden had one, and I was at his house almost every day. So it was kind of like I didn't really need to own one. At the time. And then, you know, not that I'll go down this road, but that is also about the time that I got involved in EverQuest. And so at home, I was playing EverQuest. If I was out with friends, we were playing PS2.
None of us owned a PS2. There are listeners right now that just stopped playing the podcast.
No, because you didn't need to, because everybody else had one. Exactly. I didn't need a PS2. Yep. All of my friends had one.
From 2002 to like 2005, I think I had 3 or 4 roommates at the time, you know, just different parts of life, different jobs, different places. And like, hey, I need a place. You need a place. We'll get an apartment together, whatever. Every single time, one of them had a PS2, and I was like, cool, awesome. I don't have to get one. we nonstop.
Yeah, I had a GameCube at release that I bought. And then later I ended up buying an Xbox in order to play Halo. But I even went back and bought an old PS1 at some point just to like play some old PS1 games. I owned a PS3, a PS4. I have a PS5 currently, but never had the best-selling PS2, which is wild. All right, now I think it's time to start talking about some games. So let's just take turns. We can throw some games out and talk about it. PS2 sold something like 1.5 billion games. I mean, there were so many available. A lot of them were garbage, but a lot of them were also great. So what do you guys want to talk about?
I'm gonna come in with a hot take just to make this a little spicy. Okay? The PS2, I don't think anybody questions that it was an amazing console. Like, we've already talked about what made it successful, why everybody in the world owned one. I'm coming in spicy, and I'm saying that the PS2 did not have the best lineup of games. Like, yes, it had some amazing games, and I'm sure we'll talk about those. But comparatively speaking, I think the lineup of games for the PS2 specifically, not backwards compatible to PS1, I think it was a little weak.
That is a hot take, and I disagree. I still have to fight the complex that I have, because when I owned an Xbox and my friend Curtis had a PS2 and Grand Theft Auto were exclusive to PS2 and I could not play them on Xbox.
Yep.
That still to this day in my head, I still think, oh, of course Sony has the best exclusives. And if you actually stop and look at it, that may or may not even be true at this point. But I remember just feeling salty that I was so missing out on games on PS2 that I thought PS2 had by far the best lineup of games for that generation.
Okay, so one exclusive to put the ball or put the points on Paul's side, God of War 2.
I'm not saying they didn't have great
PS2.
games. I'm not saying that it didn't have amazing exclusives, because it did. So don't hear what I'm not saying and saying that all the games sucked. What I'm saying is, if you let's just take the N64 game lineup, right, and put it up against the PS2 lineup. N64 games are a million times more memorable. I think if you put it out there and said, hey, this console had the better games, I don't think many people would argue that. Now, some of the exclusives for the PS2 are miles above Grand Theft Auto 3, for instance, right? Like that game, I mean, people would buy a PS2 simply to be able to play that game if they didn't have one already.
And San
Vice
Andreas
City.
as well,
yeah,
right?
San Andreas.
Yeah,
right? Well, that is San
three.
Andreas, right? Wait, no, that's not San Andreas, is it?
San Andreas is
I'm
PS2.
thinking Vice City, too, because Vice City was on the PS2. So, yes, Metal Gear Solid, there's Shadow of the Colossus, which I never actually played.
These are the best games of all time.
No, I get it, right? But I'm saying, comparatively speaking, number of successful or great games, I do not view the PS2 as the console that had the greatest game lineup. Like, did it have some absolute mega smash hits? Yes, it did. But it's like, at least for me, I do not equate the PS2 with best games of all time.
Yeah, ironically enough.
I was thinking more in terms of its generation. Do you think PS2 had better games than Xbox?
Oh, yeah.
Or would you have...
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so you think it was the best of the generation,
yes,
just not the best of all time.
Exactly, right. And I'm not comparing that to like the PS4 or something like that. I'm kind of keeping it in the same time frame, as far as that goes. But I just, like I said, I don't equate the PS2 when I think about greatest console of all time equals greatest games of all time.
Yeah, see, I think that for its limited, tiny little run, Dreamcast actually had better exclusives and better games than the PS2.
Crazy Taxi.
Soul Calibur, Crazy Taxi, Shenmue. That was a big deal. Shenmue was great.
What was the
Toy
shooter
Commander,
had the
which
Night
incredible.
of the Dead with the shooter gun, the little optical gun?
House of the Dead?
Is it House of the Dead?
Yeah,
that was
zombies.
that was a great little shooter to play with friends.
But then you go back and look at PS2 had Kingdom Hearts 2, so it's like,
so you never played it.
It kills. That was a big deal, actually. But I don't know. For its time, of course, we can't talk Dreamcast, which obviously, judging by
we'll have a Dreamcast episode just for you, Michael.
Like I'm a
We'll do a Dreamcast
fanboy.
breakdown. We'll talk about every game that released on the console because it's only like
All four
12
of them.
games.
I was going to say it would be a short episode.
Yeah, it's a big deal. No, but yeah, it had great games.
Right,
You're right, though.
So, Paul, I came in spicy. What's the best game for the PS2?
Oh, the very best game?
Yeah.
Ooh.
All right. I got to go Snake.
Nice.
I don't know about you guys. I heard that 7 million times whenever Snake would die. You'd hear the screaming over the earpiece. I got to talk about Metal Gear Solid 2 and Metal Gear Solid 3. Both were exclusives for the PS2. I've said this on the show in the past. For me, there's only two leaps in technology that really stand out in my mind. It was the very first time I saw a DVD. Comparing that to VHS was
Night and day.
Unbelievably a step up from VHS. And the first time I saw Metal Gear Solid 2 at Fry's Electronics, they had a demo set up where you could play it, and there was a line of 20 people wanting to play Metal Gear Solid 2. I don't think it was on any kind of timer. You could just stand there and play as long as you wanted. And
Yeah,
I didn't even
was
play
actually
it.
the timer. I was just like, Paul,
Michael
you have
was
to
there.
go. You've been here for 3 hours.
I just stood on the side watching. And I remember that people would restart the game because they just wanted to experience from the beginning. And it's got opening credits like a movie. You've got like a 10-minute opening cinematic where there's rain, Snake's in this like invisibility suit. He jumps off a bridge. He starts infiltrating a boat, and you start running around in stealth, shooting guys with tranq darts and then hiding their bodies. I mean, it was like seeing the old video games. As much as I loved the Nintendo 64, and I really, really did, like, you can't even compare what you were seeing in Metal Gear Solid 2. Still to this day, if you look up the graphics, they're not that bad, despite being 20 years old. I mean, it's really hard to talk about how revolutionary that game was.
And I think you make a good point about the graphics, too, because as much as I've been talking of Dreamcast on our PS2 episode, like, the Dreamcast was very cartoony looking with a lot of their titles. The PS2, like, it looked like that was the first time that we sat down as human beings and said, can we replace actors, like real life actors in movies, with video game technology? Because you're like, this looks... Now, of course, you look back now and it looks terrible, right? Mm-hmm. But at the time, though, that's when we first started thinking as people, like, could we replace actors with like cartoons and polygons and stuff? Because it looked really, really good. You know, that was when the whole 3D modeling thing came in, like, really, really came to play. Ironically enough, my most played game at the time was probably Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2, which I think was on every one of them. But my wife and I, to this day, we still play it. It's that's why I like what's the Divinity Original Sin 2? Like, Marvel Ultimate Alliance is the same game, just with the Divinity Original Sin 2 has the role playing part where you actually get turn based combat and so forth. But yeah.
For me, some of the games, I mean, I already touched on like Grand Theft Auto 3. That was revolutionary. And honestly, I think every Grand Theft Auto since then has kind of been revolutionary. They started the trend on that one. Like Resident Evil 4. You know, one of the best in the series, right? And Paul, you made a really good point. I think one of the things that the PS2 did is it did revolutionize a lot of the games that were out there. I don't know if it was because, see, the hardware was a little bit behind, but then again, it came out a full year ahead of Xbox and GameCube and all that. So it's like, I don't know if it's maybe that IO processor port thing that you mentioned where developers were already familiar with the PS1. So they had like a leg up to just say, hey, we don't have to relearn everything. So we can continue with what we know and expand upon that big time. Or maybe Sony was really just figuring out the exclusives and dumping tons of money into development for that kind of stuff. Who knows? You know, maybe it's that there wasn't a competitor on the horizon, so they could take that extra time to develop these games, and they didn't feel like they had to rush a whole bunch of stuff out. Because let's be honest, the game lineup at launch of the PS2 was lackluster. Now, a couple of years in, boy, did it explode at that point. You know, Guitar Hero, like, Guitar Hero didn't come out till 2005, which is 5 years after the release of the PS2, but everybody in the world knows about Guitar Hero because that was revolutionary at the time. You know, God of War, Michael, you touched on it. Now, I was late to the God of War game because I didn't play the actual the PS2 version of the God of Wars until, I don't know, probably 6 years ago, you know, as far as that goes. But man, God of War with over-the-top action, the gigantic boss fights, climbing up a Titan, or, you know, that kind of stuff.
And the cameras, the way they made the cameras move in that game, like, it was revolutionary.
Right. And that's like I said, I've never played Shadow of the Colossus. I know that game is beloved and did kind of the same thing with these absolutely incredible sized beasts that you would, you know, have to conquer and stuff like that. And nobody had seen that before either. So I don't know if it was the processing power. I don't know if maybe the developers had time to do this. So there are a lot of games that are insanely memorable for what the PS2 was.
Were the Gran Turismo and Tony Hawk games exclusive? Because I think they were. Maybe?
I think Gran Turismo, Tony Hawk definitely was not. Tony Hawk was definitely on
Gran Turismo was
Nintendo
definitely
64.
on PlayStation.
I think Gran Turismo was.
But like, whichever Gran Turismo Tony Hawk was, it was always better on the PS2.
Yeah.
At least I recall it that way.
Now, we just listed off like 40 games. Are we going to circle back to some of those? Or
sure, let's do it.
Because I was going to say, he just named half of the best-selling games on PS2.
We're just long listing.
I will go back and say one more thing about Metal Gear Solid 2. Not only was it like technologically and graphically advanced, but even the storyline is really ahead of its time. It addresses things like social media, memes, even before people knew the word meme at large. It addresses it in the game. Artificial intelligence, censorship, totalitarian governments, fake news. A lot of stuff that we see going on in the world today is actually addressed in Metal Gear Solid 2. Talk about being ahead of its time. And Metal Gear Solid 3, you can eat poisonous frogs, and it's great. Snake eats it and says, "Ugh, tastes like poison," which never failed to make me laugh whenever you did it. All right, so Michael, how about you go next? Is there a particular game you want to break down and talk about?
Oh man, I think I just listed all of them, but I think, wasn't it Soul Calibur 2 when they brought in Darth Vader and Yoda? I believe that was a big deal, right? That was PS2, I think, exclusive at that point, because Dreamcast had already gone under. And this is like probably 2004, so pretty far into PS2's run. But that was a big deal, because it was a fighting game that was beyond whatever Mortal Kombat was doing at the time. Street Fighter was a thing of the past, but it was kind of cool to see that. Actually, this is a big deal because it was a licensing thing. Like Soul Calibur had licensed with PlayStation to bring in Disney. Well, now they're Disney, but at the time Lucasfilm characters, and they had Darth Vader and Yoda who would fight. Oh, wait a minute. I think that was. Hold on, someone's got to get me on this, because I think if you had one console, you had one of them.
That's exactly what it was.
And if you had the other, yeah. So which one had Yoda? That was the PS2.
The PS2 had Yoda, if I remember right.
And the Xbox had Darth Vader, right?
Actually, I don't even know if it was Vader, was it? I think it was just
Vader.
No, I think you got somebody else that was kind of lame with the Xbox. The PlayStation 1 had the better character by far.
I never played any of the Soul Caliburs, believe it or not. But
they were great, dude.
I'm looking on
awesome.
Wikipedia. Soul Calibur 2 released simultaneously on GameCube, PS2, and Xbox. And the characters include Cassandra, Raphael, Talim,
Maxi,
Young
baby.
Soong,
Taki.
Charade. I'm not seeing... Oh, it says...
it was exclusive.
Link? No,
Yeah.
Link was on the GameCube.
That's what was.
You got a dude from Tekken. His name was Mishima. Heihachi Mishima from Tekken was on PS2.
Was that Soul Calibur 3 then? Am I getting my console
You
switched?
might
Because
be.
I swear that
I know
was the
I know
time it
exactly
happened.
what you're talking about.
Yeah.
I do, because I remember thinking, like, that's a really cool character. It sucks that character's locked to like this console that I didn't own at the time either, because I loved Soul Calibur.
All right, well then let's drop that and just talk about the amazing physics in Gran Turismo 4, guys.
Oh man.
Yeah, I just never got around to Soul Calibur. I was too busy playing Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter. I did a little bit of Tekken. Absolutely no Soul Calibur whatsoever. Just never played it. All right, Josh, there a game you want to bring up?
I was going to I mean, as a whole, the other thing too was that I think a lot of us are kind of just tired of sports games right now. There's not really, because I think they kind of ruined themselves, right? Because it was just all these like basic iterations of the same game. But back then, if a sports game came out, it was pretty incredible at the time. Like, there was a big deal for, Tony Hawk to release a new Pro Skater game, or,
right.
They had the SSX Tricky games. I still
love
to
those.
this day, like every time they had that, it's that song, like, it's time to rock around the clock, it's tricky.
Yep.
And like, my brain will forever equate that to SSX, because that was the theme song. I already talked about playing Tekken 5 with my buddies. But I mean, this is when you started getting, the ESPN footballs, your Gran Turismo games. It's just, I think that there was a heyday. I won't even get into the fact that they had Twisted Metal Black on the PlayStation. Y'all know I love that series. It's just, there's a lot of games that are memorable in that regard. I mean,
since you brought up football, I have to mention this. I could not believe, I was shocked, because in my brain, the PS2 released 28 years ago. Like, if you just asked me, how long ago do you think it came out? I would have said like 28 years. I was watching commercials for the release of the PS2, and they were highlighting that Madden was one of the release titles. And guess who you see in the commercial for the release of the PS2 throwing the football?
Please say Tom Brady.
Tom Brady
No.
on the Patriots.
No.
And I'm like, dude, he's still in the NFL. Like, it's so incredible to me that they actually have him in videos before the PS2 even released.
And he won a Super Bowl 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Like, that's insane.
Yeah, it really is. But the NHL games were incredible. I feel like that was kind of the golden age when, even if you didn't like hockey, you would still play NHL.
Oh, some of the hockey games back then were great, dude.
Yeah,
they were
because
really fun.
That was one of the first times where like truly having all the axes actually worked out really well. And instead of being a side to side type of hockey game, you could go all around and like do all those jukes and so forth with all the different angles and so forth. That was a big deal. And that's kind of like when you talk about Soul Calibur 2, like versus like what was it? You mentioned Mortal Kombat and Street Fighter and so forth. I just said and so forth like 19 times, by the way, guys.
Killer Instinct.
But like the whole thing was like games. The seamless ability to, and hear me out on this, the seamless ability to actually spin the camera around and move in a truly three-dimensional space that in a third-person view, that's what those hockey games really got down. And the soccer games, too, were incredible.
Yeah, they absolutely were. What about Max Payne? Did you guys play that back in the day?
I never played Max Payne. And I hear the series is awesome, but I just never got into it, man, for some reason.
Especially being Mr. Matrix. Like, clearly, they just said, let's take this concept of bullet time and make an entire game out of it. So, yeah, out of all the 3 Max Payne games, that's how many there have been, right? 3, I believe. You never played any of them, Josh?
No, never. I've heard of them. I've never actually... I don't think I've played a single minute of Max Payne.
Yeah, I remember the first one being very neat because it was all so highly cinematic, and they were trying to make a game kind of feel like you were in the Matrix, and it actually worked really, really well. A funny one that I thought I would bring up that might surprise you guys. I played The Sims on PS2.
No.
All right. I bought The Sims on CD-ROM for my computer. My computer could not run it. I had too bad of a graphics card, and I ended up selling The Sims to a friend of mine. And then like a year and a half or 2 years later, it ended up releasing on PS2. And Nikki's older brother bought it for his PS2. And we used to set timers and just take turns and watch each other play The Sims on console. That's actually where I got a lot of my early game time in on The Sims, was actually on PS2, believe it or not.
If I remember, I'm pretty sure that the first Splinter Cell was a PS2 game, wasn't it?
Yeah, the Tom Clancy Splinter Cell.
I was going to say, because I
PS2.
played the heck out of Splinter Cell, and I'm not generally one that's into stealth-based games, but man, was Splinter Cell a great game. And I don't remember where I played that because I didn't own a PS2, so I don't know if I borrowed a buddy's or maybe I just lived at my friend's house for a while. But like Splinter Cell was another one of those games that I felt was very much like a leader in like creating a genre almost. Like, I mean, I know that Metal Gear had the stealth segments and stuff like that, but I feel like Splinter Cell's that one where it's like they really kind of perfected a lot of that to where you really felt like you were Sam Fisher, you know, and just really like you were that secret agent guy doing all that stuff. That one stands out to me a lot. And then Silent Hill 2. Did you guys ever play Silent Hill 2?
No,
man, that game was good. I mean, everybody's heard of the Silent Hill series, right? And it's like they've been trying to recapture that ever since then. But the Silent Hill 1 and Silent Hill 2 were absolutely phenomenal horror games. And again, that was exclusive to the PS2 as well.
Yeah, you know, one of the funny things is my wife and I have arguments all the time because she's a couple years younger than I am. And around 2000, I was still playing GoldenEye a whole bunch. And she, at the time, did not really play GoldenEye, but she played Time Splitters. Do you guys remember that one?
Oh, yep. That was a good shooter game.
Yep.
Time Splitters 2 is one of my all-time favorite FPSs.
Yeah. And she, to this day, she's like, no, Time Splitters was better. It was on PS2. It came out right at launch. And your GoldenEye was terrible. So that's it.
Wait,
that's kind of funny.
She said GoldenEye was terrible?
Well, yeah, because it's pretty much like it was our high school experience. Like her and her family played Time Splitters, Now, granted, she's a couple years younger than me, but we always have that argument. I'm like, no, GoldenEye is way better. And she's like, it's trash compared to Time Splitters.
GoldenEye was like 4 years old by that point, and the technology back then was improving so fast. Time Splitters had really cool stuff. I remember playing in Time Splitters 2. We would always do 4-player split screen, and you could pull out your bow and arrow and touch it to any fire source, and it would become a fire arrow, and you could shoot people, and they would have to jump into a water fountain, which was in the wide open middle of the Mexican mission. That was the name of the map. And so you kind of just knew you could light people on fire and just follow them as they would run to the water fountain. But then, of course, you could also sit around with snipers and just take out the people trying to run to the fountain. I loved Time Splitters. It had where you played across different time eras. Very cool series. I know that they were talking about releasing another Time Splitters a couple years back, but it must have fallen through because I don't think it ever actually released.
Oh, I really wish they would. They won't, probably, but I would love to see that. He played so many different characters too over that journey, which was great. But yeah,
that's absolutely a great one.
Did you guys ever play it's funny to me because maybe this was maybe I can blame all this on EverQuest, but like Ratchet and Clank, never played Ratchet and Clank, and that was huge for the PlayStation 2. You had the Devil May Cry came out on PlayStation 2, never played that.
Yep.
And then Psychonauts, never played Psychonauts. You know, so it's like there's all these series that began with the PlayStation 2, and I've not experienced any of those.
Well, I would also confuse those in my head because a lot of them were just two names that didn't mean anything to me. So you had like Ratchet and Clank, Jack and Daxter. Wasn't that another
Dexter
series?
And Jack, yeah.
Yeah, and I never knew what they were because to me they were just like, oh yeah, I've seen that cover
Toe Jam and
in
Earl,
the store.
Banjo Kazooie, like that was a thing for a while there.
Combo
where you had to have the combo. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's one of the biggest things about the PS2 when you look back is there was so many games that came out, and like you could never point in the direction of which one you wanted to play. It's just like my friend plays this one right now, so I'll play that too. But now looking back at all those games that overlapped so much on release, you're like, how many great games and great series now and sagas and franchises came out of the PS2? Well, we just named like 100 of them, so you get it.
Yeah. Well, it was also a very brief time when you had games based on movies that were actually really good. Because nowadays you hear about those and you just shrug them off because you know it's going to be terrible if they come out with, you know, like they were coming out with like The Godfather and Scarface, and like those games never come out good. But Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, they had games that released on PS2 timed with the Spider-Man Tobey Maguire movies. And they were incredibly fun. Those were like the first really, really good Spider-Man games. And at the same time, they were also releasing Lord of the Rings games.
That was right.
The Two Towers and Return of the King, which all of those Spider-Man and Lord of the Ring games had all the real life actors record additional lines for the games. So you had the real Tobey Maguire voicing Spider-Man. You had Ian McKellen recording lines as Gandalf for Lord of the Rings. And so I feel like even PS2 even struck gold by getting some of those really good movie adaptations as well.
Which at the time, like movie actors did not care about two things: TV or video games. Yeah. And to say that you've got Sir Ian McKellen, well now, not at the time, doing voice lines for a video game as an exclusive or non-exclusive launch, whatever it is for the PS2, that's a huge thing.
Yeah. Well, we've mentioned that before as well, where the GTA games started bringing in movie, like AAA talent to record. So that was another huge revolutionary thing here, because I know that I've mentioned it previously, but the PS2 is what turned me into a gamer. Before that, my 64 really just sat unused unless I had friends over. And then when we got tired of playing basketball or it got too dark and the light wasn't working or whatever, then that's when we would play Mario Kart or Pilot Wings or whatever. But then when I started playing GTA 3 and GTA Vice City, and I started seeing that, oh, you can actually have these 40-hour-long campaigns that are just as compelling as a movie with top-line voice talent. That's what really sucked me in. That's when I started buying all kinds of games like True Crime, Streets of LA. Fantastic game, probably no one out there has even heard of. I was buying every game like that because this console is what really got me into gaming. If the PS2 was not out, I probably would have been converted at some point. But for me, this was the channel that really gripped me and brought me fully into where gaming became like my number one hobby.
All right. I'm going to take back what I said earlier because I've been scrolling through. Dude, the games on PlayStation 2 were actually incredible. And here's why I'm going to say that. I've been looking through Metacritic's list of like best PlayStation 2 games. I'm 300 deep. Literally 300 games deep, and I'm not under a Metacritic score of 80. And so I think that's the thing is like, while my brain initially goes, there was only a few mega blockbusters for the PlayStation 2. I think the issue was there was an insane amount of games that were still just really good, And so it's like, I think that gets a little bit lost in the sense that like when you went to Blockbuster and rented a game, you had an amazing chance that that game was going to be a lot of fun for the weekend, or the 3 days that you rented that game or something like that. Cause I'm just scrolling this list. I'm 300 deep and I'm finding games where it's like, oh yeah, that game was a lot of fun.
14 years of games is a lot.
Right. Exactly. And so I take back what I said. I don't know. I'm not going to say that it had the best games, but the offering of great games that it did have, I think is probably second to none now that I'm actually looking through this insanely comprehensive list. Maybe it's recency bias. People think the PS4 and the remake God of War and Red Dead and stuff like that. But man, when you have just this many incredible games to choose from, that says something.
Didn't the PS2 have the most games of all time? Console?
Probably.
Is that a stat that Paul said earlier? I'm not sure if he said that or not.
I brought it up when we did a tournament of the best console of all time because I picked PS2 in the first round, which did not win. We crowned the 64 as the best console in that tournament.
Really?
And I remember having a lot of stats.
I mean, the 64 is great.
64 is great. PS2 had by far the most games and the most game sales. When I said 1.5 billion game sales, I'm pretty sure that's accurate. And no other console even comes close. By the way, we didn't even mention some of the really popular games, especially amongst kids. Spyro, Crash Bandicoot, which are both now owned by Microsoft, which is hysterical.
I was never a fan of Spyro. I could not get, and I love dragons, man. I was a D&D nerd growing up.
My wife loved it.
I could not get into Spyro.
Yeah, I wanted nothing to do with it.
All right, so last question of the podcast. Now that we've broken down the PS2 in more detail, do you think the PS2 is the best console of all time? What do you guys think? No right or wrong answer, personal opinion.
It killed the best console of all time, which was the Dreamcast, as clearly you can hear for the first 20 minutes of this show.
Are you more sad that the Dreamcast went bankrupt or that Elite Dangerous is so low on our leaderboard?
I'm going to leave that to Twitter later on. I'll post a poll. No, is the PS2 the best console of all time? It's so hard to say. Like, what? How do you want to base it off of? Like
your
sales,
your basis,
games. Yes, it's rhetorical. I'm not asking you guys. I'm saying, like, how do you want to base it off of? Like, yes, it had the most sales by 7 times the Xbox, which blew my mind just now. It probably had by far the most games. It was revolutionary. It had a DVD player. Before the PS3 had a Blu-ray player. Man, they followed that up well, didn't they?
They sure did.
It was backwards compatible. You could use the same controllers. Nobody was doing this at the time. Is it the best console of all time? Quite possibly, yes. Ironically enough, it's perhaps the one that I've played the least of, which is why I can't really answer it that way, because it's a hard one, because arguably, yes, it's the best one of all time. Do I think it is? I think it's the one that I had the least experience with, even though I played 150 games on it.
Same with me. Like I said, I don't recall owning one. If I did, it was an old, dusty, dirty one, so that I could play whatever game at the time. This one's tough because we did crown N64 because, man, I mean, Super Mario, Legend of Zelda, GoldenEye, some of the Banjo-Kazooie, Mario Kart, I mean, it's hard to argue with those types of games.
But go ahead and put an asterisk next to your Wii because I wasn't part of this at the time.
That's true. I'll say this. I think the smartest thing that the PlayStation 2 ever did was including that DVD player. I said it at the beginning of the show. And I'm going to say it again because here we are in 2022. Right. And they're still doing this to this day where they're trying to make a console an all-in-one entertainment system. Right. And the PlayStation 2 is what started that. When they went with hey, you can use this for your family and for your gamers, that changed the industry forever. And I remember when, the Xbox 360 was coming out and the PS3 or the PS4, and everybody was really homing in on this entertainment system, they wanted to call it, right? Where it's like, hey, you can stream Netflix to this and you get these menus and you can set up profiles and your wife can have her own profile and her own little icon when she wants to watch TV. And it was like,
yep,
I'm buying a console to play video games. I personally don't care about any of that other stuff, but I get as a household purchase, if you can convince your dad or your wife or whoever, needs to be convinced that this is a good purchase for your house, that's a win. But I feel like the PS2 is what started all of that. And man, that says an awful lot.
And some crazy irony since you brought in the fact that we want all in one now, right? Like they're and we talk about this all the time in our Discord, which by the way, if you're not in our Discord, I'm sure this chat here that we're having is going to fan the flames of a lot of discussions. So, join our Discord. But the biggest thing is like there's a lot of console versus PC and so forth. Did you know that, speaking of all-in-one, PS2, I believe, was the first one to do this. There was actually a Sony Bravia TV that had a PS2 built in.
Wait,
it was the KDL 22PX300. Yep. It was
How
built
smart
in.
is that, man?
The base is the PS2 and the TV sticks out on top. It was like a 22-inch TV. Nothing
It was
special.
A 22-inch. It was awful. Yeah.
Oh,
and it didn't sell well. If you can find one now, it's probably worth a lot of money or no money. It either goes on one end or other end of the spectrum. But
I'm gonna change my answer, man. I mean, just like I said, looking at a list of just the top 300 games, what it did for getting consoles into your household and getting your parents to accept. I mean, dude, if your mom or dad walked over to the PS2 and put a DVD in to watch a movie, you felt good about that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think it is. I might have to change my answer.
Well, Sony was just so smart because the PlayStation 1 could play CDs, so you didn't have to buy a CD player. Some people may not know you used to have to spend a couple $100 on a CD player. PS2 played DVDs, PS3 played Blu-rays, PS4 they still squeezed by on all the exclusives, but they didn't really offer you anything groundbreaking in that regard. PS5, same thing. And now we're seeing where Microsoft with Game Pass has really kind of taken the mantle for best console right now. And, I'm curious to see if Sony can maybe refine some of that old magic.
PS4 did release with HDR, I think, which nobody else did. At the time.
That's not as revolutionary as playing a Blu-ray.
That's correct.
HDR is
but
great.
Did you know? But there's a little fact out there that's actually very, very, very true. Lots of varies. The PS6 is actually bringing back Betamax. Boom.
Oh, there we go.
I think we can shoot that rumor down.
Nope.
Right now.
You heard it here first.
Since we're talking about it, do you guys remember when it was Blu-ray versus HD DVD?
Sure did,
and
Josh.
The Xbox 360, like the special edition.
Yeah. There was also Super Audio CDs versus DVD audio. There were these big wars between the audio and the video formats.
Do you guys?
And I think Blu-ray won in large part because of the PlayStation.
I was going to say 100%. Blu-ray is the adopted, because I remember this insane war because I was siding with HD DVD because at the time I was kind of leaning like more of like an Xbox guy. But that was the big thing. If you remember, nobody wanted to commit because it was like, wait, is Blu-ray going to win or is HD DVD going to win? And I think Blu-ray won very much because of the popularity of PlayStation.
It's funny because we're getting way off topic because Blu-ray was PS3, but I can say that I was definitely on Team Blu-ray, and for one reason alone. is because Betamax was also Sony, and that failed for no reason other than, I don't know, the general public is dumb and Betamax is way better. And so I said, you know what? This time, Sony, you're going to win. So I was at,
I've never felt like Michael's been so old to hear him talk, to hear him rave about Betamax and the Dreamcast.
My grandfather.
Michael's also pro open reel players over streaming or over
I may or may not have one. Yeah. No, my grandfather back in 1994 when Star Trek Voyager came out was sending me, I lived in Missouri at the time, and he was sending me Betamax tapes, which at the time were archaic. They were 10 years old at the time. He was sending me Betamax tapes with Star Trek Voyager recorded on them because there was no cable back then. Anyways, long story short, go Sony. Sony fanboy for life. Unfortunately, not anymore. About a year ago, I went to war with Sony on Twitter, and I'll never buy a Sony product again. So,
oh boy, even as you're trying to buy a PS5, so
that's different. That's just because it's superior. TV, okay, okay.
Some cognitive dissonance there, but that's okay. I'm gonna say PS2 is the greatest console. I think it did not even have the best hardware within its generation. GameCube and Xbox were both better. Xbox had Xbox Live, which revolutionized online gaming, but the PS2, man, you can't argue with 155 million sales. They just absolutely crushed the games, the marketing, coming out a year early, playing DVDs. I think you've got to say it's the most successful, no question. And so I'm going to say, best console I would say is the PS2.
You know, I'm really glad we all agree on this because I'm in Team PS2. It definitely is the best console ever. I'm very happy that a week ago, when we recorded, or a week ago when our last episode released, we were not in agreement on the best game of all time, let alone the best space game of all time. But you know what? I feel like we've healed together with the PS2, and what a great thing to heal together, even though y'all are wrong about Elite Dangerous.
I mean, really, the Atari 2600 was the best console of all time, but you know, we won't go back that far.
No.
150 million sold or 150 sold?
Hey, it got consoles into people's houses, Michael.
No, that's true.
That's true. All right. Well, if those of you out there are curious to know, our next deep dive game is going to be V Rising. So as always, we have our This Week in Gaming episodes on Thursday and our quick takes on Saturday. But then our next hour-long plus episode a week from today will be on V Rising, which I think will be an absolute blast to talk about. I know that we have spent a ton of time. We did some of our first castle raiding. We're going to be able to talk about all of that a week from now. Can't wait to get into it. Please join our Discord. It's free. Link is in the episode description. And once again, if you want extra content and to help fund our show, multiplayersquad.com is where you want to go. You can see all of our Patreon options, which start at $5 a month. And we're all done. So hope you guys enjoyed reflecting back on the times of the PS2. And there's still some great games you can play out there on emulators, or if you still have your old console sitting around. And I think that's it for today.
On top of all this, one more thing. If you follow the tweets and the Twitters and the Twitter action, I'm going to put a poll out that asks, is the PS4 or PS2 the best console of all time? Let us know what you think. Follow us at Multiplayer Pod, wherever consoles are looked at online. And by that, I mean only Instagram and only Twitter. Because we're not doing the TikTok, because that's a lot of work. And also, we're old. So.
We're old. We're too old for TikTok.
Yeah. Exactly.
All right. We'll see you guys next time. Happy gaming.
See you, everybody.